It's the adrenaline from the passion of doing what you're doing.
Every 5K run we do, or every walk we do, that's money you put in the bank.
All of us have the ability to do politics. It's about how we open the doors.
There's certain indigenous philosophies that binds us all.
These are transactions you don't do every day. Purchasing or selling a home is not, you're not expected to be the expert.
What's in the vault? You need to put the right things in that vault. Make sure that you're mentally prepared for the world.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Mental Wealth Podcast. My name is Will Fleming.
And I'm Makirei Maricela Thompson.
Today we have, an awesome guest for you. Hey, brother.
Definitely, mate. We've got Caroline Westerlund-Wilson joining us this morning. Caroline, welcome, my friend. Good to see you again. And to get the ball rolling, who is Caroline?
I guess e mo lavanga si ilvi inga malfaftai ili atua elona lofa malona ngalelei o tātou au lia mai ele nei tai au longo Caroline. Ma kua o mai Samoa. So my parents come from Samoa. My dad comes from Lingu'u o Li'ili, and my mum comes from Lingu'u o Alamangoko. They kind of, like everyone else's parents, came to New Zealand 1970s, had us in Wellington, and then they decided, maybe Auckland might be a bit better. So they came where all of our Pasifika were at the time, which is where we are right now. And then they heard of, this beautiful green patch of grass called Otara, and landed us there and have been there ever since and still reside in South Auckland. Very proud of where I have been raised. And so when I do my mahi around country, I always take note of where I'm from. I've got 2 kids that keep me quite busy, and I have 1 husband. That's all I can handle. And I probably will only have 1 husband in this lifetime because, it's a lot of work to keep the love alive, I guess. And so they keep me fairly busy, and my family are my heart. And so that's me.
So, Caroline, why did you get into business? Do you come from a business family?
Yeah, I do actually. So I come from a long line of business owners. My dad was a business owner. His dad was a business owner. Their parents were business owners. Both my grandmothers or my grandfathers were quite hands-on men. They built buses, or they were engineers in the mechanical industry and built houses. Most of my uncles. So it's kind of in the blood. And I guess when you're raised by a father who thinks that way, it tends to, you kind of go into a job, a 9-to-5 job, and the way you were raised is different from how the workplace expects you to think and act. And so you would find these dilemmas in yourself where you're like, why don't they listen to me? Because I can see something different. But then you have to, really, there's a threshold when you're working for someone, and fair enough, they pay you. So there's a threshold on how far you can grow, and there's a threshold on how wide you can do things, and how, so I used to feel as thankful as I was for a job, because, it was money. Money's money. As thankful as I was for a job. There was something else in me that was like, I don't know if I'm going to be, subservient and obedient for much longer. So I was like, because there's stuff I wanted to do and stuff I wanted to say, and I don't, I guess I'm not a 9-to-5 person as well. So that's the other thing. If you're not a 9-to-5 person, it's really hard to turn up to work on time and then, stay that long haul. I'm a night person. I'm an early morning person. I'm a all over the show person. Type thing in terms of my biological clock. So I was kind of like, I could sense that it just wasn't a fit, and I could feel this itch, this itch of wanting to go out. But then, you only see what your dad does. You only see what your grandparents do. And then you have this vision, and then you're like, but they don't do it that way. So how am I going to learn? And so it just feels like this massive desert in front of you. Like, if I go, even though it's in me, or my parents have this business acumen and business sense, I still wouldn't know how to bring this idea to life. So it's still scary because everyone does it different as well. Yeah.
So what was the tipping point for you?
I guess the biggest tipping point was when you have kids. And then we have a child with a disability, so her needs are a little bit more specific, which require, hey boss, can I take the day off? And then I found myself finding a lot of passions that I couldn't do after work. I needed daytime to do it. Or I needed the whole night to do them, and then I'd come to work looking like crap, which is not good. And then my husband is quite a visionary, so he was like, I'm going to do this Mad Messenger thing, and I was like, what? So actually, let's go a few years back before that. He's like, I want to, I'm going to do a family band thing, and we're going to do music, art, drama, and I was like, that sounds like fun. And so I was like, okay, I'll help you out. But we found working and trying to do that, like something had to go. And then when we had kids, you throw that into the spanner, man, you really can't commit to a job. And I feel for the employers, because they give you what you're worth, and you can't give them over. You give them what they're worth. You could give them more, but then you sometimes shortchanging them because you're trying to do all this other stuff. And I see people out there who are in that dilemma. They want to go do their thing, but they don't know how. Then they do it at work, and then I'm like, as a business owner now, I'm real mindful of people using my time like that. Right. So then I'm like, if you want to go own your own business, do it, but not on my watch. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the learning now.
It sounds like you took a leap of faith. Is that correct? Or is that how you see it?
Yeah, I do, actually. I see it as you jumping off a cliff and not knowing what the hell you're going to land in. It's not a nice jump as well. It's a real desert land space. You walk in going, yeah, I made the jump. And then you walk in, you're like, who do I talk to? Yes. When's my next meal going to come from? Where's it going to come from?
Caroline, can you break the jump bit down a bit? What's the reality of that? How does that play out?
I was warned very early before the jump. So before the jump, I did get schooled up in it. I didn't just jump without any information. I jumped knowing, I jumped on the advice and the information people gave me that it's hard. You need to be prepared to eat bread and water for a few months. You're going to have to go without for a long time. And I was like, oh man. And so I had to really consider, like, what can I live without? What can my family live without? And so it was a real decision to kind of go, okay, if we jump, we're likely to have these real long lull moments. Dry spots is what I called them. But man, they don't really prepare you for the reality of those dry spots, because I guess when you have those dry spots when it's your children's birthdays and you can't you can't give them a present or something like that, and you're like, no, we made this sacrifice and we just have to hold it out. But at the same time, being, I guess, a person who has made a decision like that, you kind of have to go, okay, what can we do to make this birthday special with the $5 we have? And so we did that. And there's this picture. I hate Facebook because it keeps popping up, that memory. So his birthday's coming up and the memory comes up every year. And I'm like, great reminder of what that low, that dry spot feels like. And so it's interesting because the feeling is real. Like, it still sits. And as you open that up, thanks for that. As you open that up, that when you look back, it's those moments that remind you, when you get past it. When you get past it, you go, I was about to swear, but I'm not. When you get past it, you go, I'm never going to go back there. I'm never going to have that moment again. And that was, I think, maybe in the first 2-3 years, we knew when my son's birthday was coming up. After that birthday, I was like, man, I'm going to make sure we have work geared up in that dry period to make sure I don't have a birthday like that for him again. And so, he was only 3 at the time when I'm talking about that memory. But once again, as hard as it was, I had to come back to the advice that was given to me. It's hard. You make this decision informed. You know that you're going to go through these dry spells and you're going to stay there. And was I tempted to go back? Oh my goodness. If you had my husband here, he'd maybe show you some of those scratch marks. Cause he would, he'd get the whole, like, the panic you go through, and the whole, why did we do this? Look at us. We can't even provide a present for our own son. Like, what were we thinking? Just go get a job. Just go get a job. And he's actually quite a rock for me, because he's like, no, we made this decision. We stick to it. I'm like, no, go get a job. You go get a job. I'll stay here and hold the fort. And he's like, no, we made this decision. We stay here and we write it out. And I was like, because I guess when you come from a family that is business oriented, you're used to having money. You're used to it. And so when you have these periods, you're not. And my gosh, and when you don't, your value systems start to kick in, and the whole internal dialogue around you failed, you're poor, your poverty, all that negative jargon that goes on in your head starts to really speak volumes. And then you're like, and this is the dilemma. And this is why I think if people aren't informed and prepared before they jump, you can very easily come back, because your emotions say it's shameful, it's ugly, you failed. And what we've got to remember, that's the process. That's what builds the resilience, is, like my husband said, write it out. And I was like, no, you write it out. No, you write it out, G. Tell me to write it out. So yeah, it's that, you just got to stick to it. Have we had other dry periods? Absolutely. But it gets lesser and lesser. You're just like, yeah, sweet. Okay, now we're in another dry spell. What do we do to create? And so the innovation and the creativity, I think, is more at your fingertips the longer you stay there. But right at the beginning, man, those initial pitfalls, man, they hurt, man.
Oh, man, that sounds scary. And I'm wondering, should I do it? Is it worth it?
I love what I do. It's not even work. This weekend alone, I probably have only had 5 hours sleep since Friday. And somebody, I'm sending emails to people at 4:00 in the morning, and they're like, do you even sleep? And I'm like, nah, you know what? I'm on adrenaline right now. It's not healthy, by the way, everybody. This is not healthy practice. It was just this weekend, because I had some real big projects I had to get done. It's not healthy. That's why I'm listening to myself, saying to stop. But somebody asked me, how are you able to sustain yourself? And I'm like, you know what? It's the adrenaline from the passion of doing what you're doing. You can see the idea come to life, and it's a hard slog, because when you're bringing this idea to life and you see everything, you see the detail, you see the dots and the T's, you see the pages, like every bit of decision is there, and you're like, you want to get it right for the people who are going to use it. And so it's the people that you're working with, it's the bigger purpose, and suicide prevention and mental wellness is my thing. And so if I know this is going to benefit communities, that's a driver. But it's also what's been sitting in your head for years, and now it's coming out, and you're like, this is your creation.
Caroline, just want to thank you for sharing so openly. Now, you did touch on suicide prevention. Can you take us down that track?
I guess just a step before that, education and training and teaching people and upskilling people. I'm very passionate about that. I used to start writing education programs for our rangatahi in Otara, and I started at Clover Park when I was like 17, 18, and kind of had fun doing it. I was like, I enjoy doing this, coming up with different ways to teach our young people how to understand things like sex and abortions and well-being and all of that stuff. And I really enjoyed doing it back then. But I guess as I went through my education path, started to find other areas where that sat. Never in my wildest dreams, though, did I ever think suicide prevention would be a pathway for me. And I don't think it is for many people. I think it's something that you're confronted with when you are bereaved by suicide. So our family went through, we lost a family member to suicide. And I guess some of the questions that come out of that is like, why? That's what everyone wants to ask. But the biggest question for me is, how come our help wasn't helpful? We tried everything. I think if you go back and look at what everyone was trying to do, was we were all trying to help. But nobody talked about it. Everyone was just guessing. I think he needs this. I think he needs that. I think he needs this and that. And I think in our intentions and our love for this person, the outcome was we did lose him to suicide. And so progressing forward, the question then became for me, it became a journey. And the journey was, I needed to understand, like, how could someone that was so dear to me teach us that suicide wasn't an option, and then all of a sudden suicide became their option. And I needed to really understand that. And I guess along my journey, I then took my passion for training and education and found a space there where a lot of our communities don't really know how to have these conversations. They don't know how to open up. But what I do know is our people want to help. Everybody wants to help someone who's in this space. But it's just we lack that how to, and we lack the whole, what happens to me when I start to come across this? Because there's all that internal stuff that happens. And so when that gateway opened up, I was like, okay, I love training. They're looking for a trainer. I'll jump in. So I jumped in, and still wasn't easy. I was like, I don't know if I could talk about this stuff. But as the journey progressed, and the more I engaged with people at the front line, I was like, wow, man, it really is a gap. There's a real gap for these kinds of conversations. And so over the last few years, we've kind of reframed them and really seen them as what we call life supporting conversations, because everybody wants to support. And maybe if you're the first support, you might be able, through that life supporting conversation, find these other supports to then build that community. So the journeys come from a real place of sadness, a real place of heartbrokenness. And I guess for my family, it's the one thing I could, I don't know. So I don't know if it's give back, but it's the one thing I needed to do to be able to get the answers and maybe help other people not be in that place.
Now, for our audience watching and or listening to this interview, now, what is your organisation? What do you guys do?
So the name of the organisation is AOKNZ. Actually, we have a few. We have a few companies, but this one that I'm talking about in regards to suicide prevention is called AOK.NZ. It's acts of kindness that enable life-supporting communities. And I guess the heart of the name is, we need qualified people. Big ups to our doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and counsellors who do their mahi. There's just not enough of you guys. So to kind of assist them and support them, we want to be able to enable everybody else. And what we've learned is even with those qualifications, people are limited, because this tinana, this henenaro that we have, it limits us. It's not always on its best performance level. And even with the qualification, they may have days where they can't have those conversations. So who else can come in? Families, community, pastors, sport coaches. And that's the bigger picture, is how do we take that skill set and hand that over to our community so that they can enable those conversations to support our formal support services that are already overloaded already. And I really need to keep that in mind, because everyone's saying, go counsellor. Silly. Do you know what the waiting list is? Like, you stand in the space and have that conversation.
Caroline, we've talked a bit about trauma and passion. Do you think there's a way, or can we talk about teaming those up to be like a superpower of, I don't know, drive?
Trauma produces pain, doesn't it? Traumas come from an experience that produces a pain. And in that moment of that pain, people have, I guess, on a hunt to try and manage that pain, people have gone to look for a way to manage that through whatever coping they've engaged in that moment. And I think if we're not having these conversations, people may not have the opportunity to really see what that trauma has produced in terms of a response. And so for some, if they've had the opportunity to talk about it, they may have found some passion around that. And then for others who haven't talked about it, they may have, by chance, just come across it and maybe found that it marries. I think for me, I've always had the passion prior to the trauma. But in saying that, I see where you're going. It does. The passion does ease some of that.
So what is passion? How did you find yours?
I don't even think passion is one thing. It's definitely an emotion. And I think as you get older, that emotion signals an area of desire or an area of enjoyment. And I must say, if I was to apply for a job today, my resume would be huge because I have so many passions. And I think when you find the one thing you enjoy, and that's what emotions do for us, isn't it? They tell us, hey, you really like this. You may not be good at it, but maybe in the enjoyment of it, you might stay there long enough to learn some of those skills. But the thing is, passion can also be impulsive. And I know when we're talking to rangatahi in the schools, and that's the other part of our business is 1 degree workshops, and that's just focused on rangatahi in schools and on the other end of the life spectrum. I know when we're talking to them about passion, we really try to be mindful that passion can fizzle out because it's based on an emotion, and it's almost like a marriage. You have to feed it. You have to constantly be in it. And if you're not in it, you can very easily go, oh, yeah, no, I'm not even in it. I don't really like it anymore. So it's like a marriage with your passion. You've got to really feed it. You've got to discover it. You've got to explore it, and not just be sucked into the emotional part of it. You got to, like you said, I might try that. Try it. See if it, if you can sustain it. If you can sustain it, hey, this might be a marriage.
Now, you're an entrepreneur, successful businesswoman. Do you have a strong strategy or a business plan? You've been in the game for a while. Tell us a little bit more.
That's a good question, Ray. I don't know if I can answer that. We're still alive, thank God. Yeah. And we always count our blessings that we are. I guess prior to going into 100% working on my own, I was part of a well-established advocacy service. And I saw the downfall of that, and I saw what happens when you apply for funding, and what happens when the funding stops. And my gosh, was it like it was such a scare for me to see how you could have all these resources and all these people paid, and overnight, no more funding. Sorry, we're ending the contract as of this date. And that's it for you guys. And just seeing the dismantling of that and the emotions and all the hard work that had gone into building that beast. Man, I was really taken aback, and that has really scared me in terms of relying on any funding. And so, my husband and I, in all the projects that we've engaged in, we've not applied for funding. We have recently, because we have this one heart project that we do that we were like, okay, we can't afford it this year. We're going to have to get funding for that to keep that alive. I do fear, though, at some point that if the funding's not available, can we fund it? And that's what we've got to plan for in the future, is that we're able to fund that. But we haven't applied for funding, and we've just gone off old school transactions. This is how much this program's worth. And can you pay on time, please? And we just deliver a really good job and hope that it's reciprocal. It is about relationships. But in terms of the business model, we've learnt more as we've gone on. Like, we're starting to learn about subscriptions. We're starting to learn about package deals and discounts and all that. And that's starting to come to life as we start to realize the bigger cost and the expenses that we need to be able to stay alive. And for us, that's the priority, is keeping this alive. If we're lucky, we'll eat. But in saying that, yeah, that's kind of how we've kind of operated. Will it stop us from applying in the future? I mean, we can't rule it out. I mean, we've done a lot of good work that I think the government needs to pay for at some stage to be able to offer it for free for everyone else. We might consider it, but if we did, we'll always keep in mind that what happens if they stop? What's the plan for that? What's the backup for that? And so just keeping that, how we've lived how we've operated over the last 14, 15 years, how we've operated and stayed alive for the last 15 years, that we continue that way. But I don't think, sometimes when I hear funding models and business plans, I sometimes feel like, are you just trying to close us in? I think it's such a Western way of doing business. I don't know, sometimes you look at the Eastern countries and our Pacific forefathers, they'd be like, what business plan? What funding model? They're just like, you got money? Give me money. I give you service. Like, I get the whole, we got to think like that, but I don't want to rule out that there are other ways to apply to keep us alive.
Can you talk a little bit more about relationships? I think for me personally, it's why I was successful in my professional capacity, because I felt that relationships were very, very critical in terms of how you conduct yourself and how things transpire later on. But tell me a little bit more about your views on relationships and how important it is in your line of work.
Well, firstly, it comes down to how we view them. Are we viewing the people that we serve? Are we viewing them as just money? And are they just a transaction? We didn't have it. We've never had a marketing budget. So what I'm about to say is the people that we serve are very important for us because they're almost our word of mouth as well. So we've always known that they are vital. If anything, we're so thankful that they even asked us to do any work. Always grateful that they've turned to us and said, hey, can you do this? Can you do this for us? We're like, yes, because the yes means so many things. It means business growth. It means bringing these other ideas to life. It means feeding the family. It means feeding the staff, or, just getting things going. And so when, in that moment, when we sign a contract or we're saying yes, or we're delivering that service, that relationship then becomes the reciprocal for so much. And so when we see them, we don't just see them as a client or a customer. We see them as a resource for so much. And so how do we treat them? My gosh, I don't know if I've said enough. We're just so grateful that we'll go over and above to make them feel so special, and that we've met all their needs and all of that. But it's more than just the transaction or the transactional relationship.
Now, would it be fair to say after that relationships is very, very important and a strong part of your line of work?
Like it's such a beautiful process when you are engaging with people in that way. Like if you're like, when we run workshops, for example, we're not just running these workshops to get a workshop delivered. No, that's not why we're doing it. We spend 16 hours with these people, 2 full days, 1 whole day in some instances. You get a piece of each other's lives. You get to hear what they need. You get to see their visions. And so part of having your own vision is also hearing what other people's visions are. And if they kind of marry, don't you want to sort of build, really help build each other's visions? And so while they've come in to do a workshop, we've met their need, then it's like, where else can this relationship go? Because the end point is so big. The mahi that we're always trying to do is not just deliver. It's also about really making societal changes, community changes, national changes, international changes. We know there's a ripple effect. And so if you can see that some of these people have an alignment around those visions, what can we do to help you? And, how can we keep this relationship going? Because I know if I help you, you're not just helping us, but you're also helping build that bigger picture. And we may not all work together, but what you do in your corner of New Zealand helps us with what we're trying to achieve too. So it's really looking at that relationship different, eh?
I love that the first half of this podcast, we've just talked about you, Caroline, and not about the business that you run. I feel like most people will talk about the business, but we want to celebrate the person. Just on a bit of a side tangent, can you please tell us what the term mental wealth means to you?
Yeah, mental wealth to me, and you know what? I've struggled with that term. I've struggled putting money and, like the connotation of money and well-being together. I really struggled with it, and I couldn't until right now, actually. So what does it mean to me? It really means being your most optimal self so that you can bring, some of those visions and dreams that you have to life. And it's like a mountain, eh? You can, those moments are real, aren't they? Those mental wealth moments might only just be for a couple of minutes before your kids arrive from home and your husband's like asking for, the typical question, what are we eating? Oh my gosh. Yeah, mental wealth to me is having those moments where we're at our peak. And at our peak, we can go, oh, I got here. And then something happens or we might come down a bit, but then it's knowing I got there yesterday, I can get there again. And those moments are beautiful. Those moments are absolutely beautiful. But in saying that, I think that if we're looking at a mountain, it's not falling too much down, but sort of staying around that peak. But also, I guess if you are going to, have those real low times, the stress times, which is part of life. That mental wealth is also about their journey to come back up. If you're at the bottom, we can also say mental wealth is recognizing that I can take one step to move up. We've got to recognize that as well. So that to me is mental wealth.
And can you please just tell us a bit more about the amazing mahi you do? Just elaborate a little bit for our awesome audience.
I guess for us, we'd like to train as many people as possible in the life-supporting communities helper roles is what we've called them. We need a whole heap of safety aiders, connectors, but I guess the bigger picture is we need a whole heap of trainers. We need trainers who can say, hey, I want to be a trainer for my region, and we need leaders in the regions to say, we want to be able to do something for our region. So if you're sitting here listening and you're sort of going, hey, I've been thinking of doing something, or I've been thinking of jumping, and I'd like to jump into the space and do something for my region or my community, come and ask us. We've got some templates. We can help you.
Lastly, Caroline, thank you very much for being on our podcast and sharing a wealth of knowledge with our listeners and our viewers. We appreciate all the awesome mahi that you're doing out in the community, and we look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon.
Well, thank you, Caroline, and thank you to you, the audience, for joining us on this podcast. On behalf of Ray and I, we want to thank you, the audience. We want to thank our guests and Foundation North, who have been very gracious in the support to make this awesome conversation happen. So that's it from us, bro. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, and see you soon.